Hello and welcome. It's Al here from musicguypodcast.com. Today I just wanted to do a quick video showing you how I mix the podcast currently, in case you're interested in mixing a podcast of your own, or if you're just curious as to how we make it sound the way we do. So just jumping into this session here, this is one of the latest episodes we did with our special guest Sean Giovanni. Mixing a podcast isn't all that difficult. It's pretty heavily based on my approach to mixing vocals from my 10-step mix video series, which you can also find on this YouTube channel. But we'll just go through the plugin chain that I'm using here. So this is actually Sean's mic, our special guest. Now what we do is when we record the show, even though we're recording over Discord, which is an online sort of video chat service, kind of like Zoom or Skype, Sean is also recording his own voice through his microphone into Pro Tools or Audacity or whatever software he's using. And so literally what I get him to do, or any guest, and Mike included, is to actually clap into their microphone, and I'll literally hold up my headphones to my microphone and try to catch the sound of them clapping to theirs so we can sync it up later. So I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but here's Sean clapping into his microphone, which is nice and loud, and just above it here, and perhaps if I zoom in a bit, there's a little blob of audio here, and that's the sound of the clap coming through my headphones into my microphone. I literally hold them up like this and try to get that clap in there so that we can sync it for post-production, and that way you get a nice clear sound of the guest's voice and not the choppy sort of internet voice call sort of sound. So that's how we sync it up. And the first plugin that I normally use on a vocal, especially for podcasting where there could be a bit of background noise, maybe the guest has their speakers on or their headphones turned up really loud, or they're wearing open back headphones like mine, and you're going to get a little bit of bleed coming in from the other microphone. So if I just solo up Sean's mic in an area where he's not even talking, you'll actually hear an echo of my voice if I don't have this gate enabled here. So I'm going to bypass this gate and have a listen to this. Randy Houser, Meatloaf, Zach Wild, Big and Rich. So that's me listing off Sean's many wonderful credentials. So what we do is we put an expander gate, and I'm just using the stock Pro Tools one. I like to use the default attack speed of 10 milliseconds. I sort of originally thought, like, why not go as quick as possible to 10 microseconds or whatever this is, just to make sure that the voice never gets cut off. But I find that can make it sound a little bit choppy. So lately I've just been using the default attack setting, default range, default release. If I need the gate to stay open a little bit longer, I'll make the hold a little bit longer. And I'm just adjusting the threshold up and down so that I get exactly the amount of noise reduced that I need, and no more than that. And Sean's voice will still sound nice and natural.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity that can be found in a crisis like this, and that's what we've been trying to. Me and my team have been trying to focus our energy and perspective on.
Some of you might be noticing right away, especially if you're using higher quality headphones or speakers, that there's a high frequency kind of buzz happening in his microphone, and the gate is doing a pretty good job of disguising that, but you can hear when he starts to speak that buzzy sound comes in.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity that can be found in a crisis like this.
And if I were to solo an area with the gate off, you'll really hear it. So what I use to deal with that is a plugin called Z-Noise or Z-Noise from Waves, and I'll show you how we use that. The first thing you have to do is teach it what you want it to remove. So it's going to learn a noise profile. So what we're going to do is we're going to select an area of the track where nothing is happening except the sound of the noise that we want to remove. We're going to click Learn. I'm going to hit play. And all it needs is just a little bit of time there. And then I'm going to unclick Learn. And you can see that it's created a noise profile of what we're going to remove. So I turn the reduction all the way up to max. I think it usually starts at 0. Turn it all the way up to max. And then what we're going to do is adjust the threshold until the noise is gone. So we'll just have a listen to that same area on repeat. I've got loop enabled here by right-clicking, selecting loop, and we'll see if we can eliminate that noise. And there we go, the noise is gone, and then we'll just check Sean's voice to make sure that it still sounds natural, because if you go a little too far, it can start to distort the actual sound of the vocal.
I feel that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity that can be found in a crisis like this, and that's what we've been trying to. Me and my team have been trying to focus our energy and perspective on.
So it's a lot cleaner, obviously, now. Now, because Z-Noise is a forward-looking plugin, there's going to be a significant delay on this track now when we hit play. So it's going to be out of sync with the rest of the vocal track. So in order to alleviate that, and also just to make it make Pro Tools run a little bit more smoothly when we're hitting play, we don't want that sort of 1 second delay. We're going to freeze the track up to this insert by right-clicking, Z-Noise, freeze up to this insert. And this will take a moment to process. So this track is now frozen, and the audio underneath it can't be edited. So if you want to be able to edit what's underneath, you would need to use the commit up to this insert function. If you do need to make an edit and you want to unfreeze the track, you just click the name of the track and say unfreeze. All right, so now we've got our noise removed, and we've got our background noise removed with our gate. So the next plugin that I use is a subtractive EQ. Again, this is just a stock Pro Tools EQ. And what we're looking for, similarly to the 10-step mix, is just areas of buildup in the frequency spectrum that might be caused by the room that the guest is in, or just the way that their voice actually resonates naturally. So we'll have a look at a few of these frequencies. There's usually one in the 100 range, one in the 200 range, and one in the 300 range. So just to show you, if I push the Q all the way in, so it's as tight as possible, and boost the red frequency as high as it goes, we'll hear that resonance happening. And this is what I call going fishing for bad frequencies. So we'll see how this sounds.
I feel that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity that can be found in a crisis like this, and that's what we've been trying to. Me and my team have been trying to focus our energy and perspective on. I feel that. I think that there's a lot of.
So we find the point of buildup, and I just reduce the gain to 1 dB below 0, just -1, and then I'll flatten out the Q by holding Alt and clicking on it. And now what we have is a nice gentle cut of a buildup area in the frequency spectrum. We do the same for this frequency around 200. I'll show you what that sounds like.
I feel that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity.
And this one around 348.
I feel that. I think that there's a lot of.
And you could keep going, but generally I find that you want to leave alone most of the stuff in the super low areas, and also sort of anything above, I don't know, 700 hertz. I usually don't tend to find resonant bumps there, so I tend to leave those alone. The next plugin is another EQ. This is the Schoeps EQ from Waves, and this is just a preset I found that I liked. It's called Vocal 1. And I think it sounds pretty good. It adds a little bit of low end to the voice and a little bit of top end and a little bit of clarity in the mid-range. So we'll show you what that's doing.
I feel that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity that can be found in a crisis like this.
Just a little bit more thump, a little bit more presence. Sounds pretty good. And then coming out of that EQ that's adding that brightness, we want to make sure that we're taming the S's so they're not too prominent in the sound of Sean's voice. So usually I'll use a frequency analyzer such as this one here, the PAZ frequency. And what I'll do is I'll just look for the frequency that spikes when Sean says word with the letter S in it.
A crisis like this, and that's what we've been.
So right here,
a crisis like this, and that's what.
So it seems like this frequency up here is really spiking when he says crisis. And so that frequency is somewhere between 7K and 9K maybe. And I'll just click there and see what it says. So like 8,970, let's say. So we're going to set that de-esser to 8970. And then we're just going to have a look and see that it's attenuating only the areas where he's singing S.
A crisis like this, and that's what.
And we can dig into it a bit more maybe.
A crisis like this, and that's what we've been trying.
There you go. So now we're just taming a little bit of the S's there. For compression, I like to use the RVox from Waves. I like to dig into this one pretty hard for a podcast. I'll use it a little bit more subtly in a record, but I find that it adds a nice timbre to the voice as well as leveling out the volume. So we're looking for like 6 to 12 dB of compression on this guy.
I feel that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity that can be found in a crisis like this, and that's what.
So it adds a lot of volume as well. It's just kind of built into the plugin, but I think it sounds pretty good, and that's what I'm using. And then finally, I use an EQ just to taper off the super low stuff, 80 hertz and below, and the super, super, super high stuff, 20 kilohertz and above. So this is just going to get rid of if there's like a fan noise or like a truck drives by or something that's going to cause some rumble, or maybe the speaker sort of taps the mic stand by accident. It's going to get rid of all that sort of noise. And then the super top stuff is just stuff that we don't even really hear anyways, and it helps to free up a little bit of digital headroom. So that's the chain, and then I'll apply that to all the channels, adjusting the frequencies in the subtractive EQ as we see fit, and adjusting the frequencies in the de-esser as we see fit, as well as the gain structure to make sure that we're hitting the desired amount of compression on the RVox. Now, all of these tracks, including our title music and end music, which is in this track up here, are all going to our mix bus. And this is a mono mix bus because a podcast generally is presented in mono as opposed to stereo, which most music is presented in. And I've only got two plugins on it. I've got the SSL comp with my with the mastering preset that I just popped on from Waves here, and it's got the slowest possible attack, moderate ratio, auto release, and basically we're just looking for the voices to just tap this at their loudest points. So we'll see how that's doing. Recording studio happen when you can't get together with people in the same room.
Well, a little bit of it is kind of how my business was built.
So just tapping it a little bit there. And then finally we've got our L3 limiter with the out ceiling as high as you can go before hitting 0. This is minus 0.1. And adjust the threshold until we're seeing just a little tiny bit of attenuation at the loudest points of any spoken word.
Well, a little bit of it is kind of how my business was built.
So you can see we're just touching it just a tiny little bit, and that'll make the voices of the podcast as loud as possible without having any noticeable distortion, so that the listener doesn't have to turn up their iPhone super loud to hear your podcast. So when the podcast is balanced, I'll just sort of balance each voice using the volume faders. We're ready to print. So actually, before we print this, I'm going to need to clip off this the front bit of this track here. So we'll just unfreeze it real quick, clip that off, and we can freeze it again. All right, so now that we're ready to print, I know the first thing that happens in this podcast is the intro music, and the last thing that happens is the outro music. So I can select all that area either by double-clicking Shift and double-clicking again, or even just pressing Control-A while I'm on my music track. And from here, I'm going to jump down to the mix bus mono track, and we can see that selection has transferred to that track because I do have link track and selection enabled up here. And from there, because we're on Pro Tools 12, which is the best, it has the commit function. So hopefully you have something like this. Otherwise, you're going to have to create a new audio track, send your mix bus to it, and hit record and press play, and sort of wait for the duration of the podcast in order to print it. I don't use offline bounce. I believe that you lose some audio quality and some volume there. So I've always just used the commit function. And the way we do that is by right-clicking the mix bus, selecting commit, and choosing edit selection to make sure that we get exactly the amount that we've selected here. And we're just going to hit OK, and that's going to take a couple minutes to process because this is a nearly 2-hour-long podcast. So we'll hit OK. All right, so now the commit is complete, and we can see we've got this mix bus mono commit 01 that's being created for us here. So now we can mute the old mix bus and just have a listen to a little bit of this to make sure that it sounds okay.
Expand the resources that I can pull from, and when I'm looking for something specific, let me find the person that's the best at that.
So sounds pretty good to me. We can see that it's absolutely hitting the volume ceiling as close as we can get without distortion, which is good because it'll be nice and loud for the folks that are listening to it. So we'll just give it a name, switch to the F8 tool, double click, and we'll call this one 33 Sean Giovanni. And now we're ready to export and upload to our podcast hosting service of choice. Now, space to host podcasts is not free. We want to make this file as small of a file size as we can. Fortunately, we're in mono, so that cuts the file size in half right off the bat. But we can do a few other things as well. So we're going to go Control-Shift-K to export the selected audio. We're going to choose MP3 instead of WAV, which will drastically reduce the size. And we're going to choose the mono format. We'll choose a place to export to. So we can go ahead and throw it in the folder related to our podcast, and we'll hit export. And now we're going to get an option of how we want to encode this MP3 file. Now 192 kilobytes per second is a great bit rate for audio because it maintains the integrity of that file quite well while reducing the size. But given that there's not really any music per se in this podcast. There is our intro and outro, but the focal point of the podcast is not the music, it's the spoken word. We don't need to worry as much about the audio fidelity, and we can actually get away with going down at least half to 96 because we're in mono. But I found that we can go as low as 64, which would double to 128, which for an audio MP3 is still a reasonable bit rate to have in terms of audio quality. But again, because we're in mono, we can go half that. So I like to go down to 64 kilobits per second, kilobits per second, and then we'll hit OK, and Pro Tools will produce an MP3 for us. And now if we go ahead and check the size of this MP3, it's only 55 megabytes, and is going to save us some real estate when we upload it to our podcast hosting service. I hope this video was helpful to you guys. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below, or you can reach me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Alro Music. You can reach the podcast at Music Guy Podcast. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.